Welcome to this session of the Beyond the Veil Summit, where we'll explore the nature of the veil between the worlds. I'm Lisa Bonis, your host, and my guest for this session is MarkAnthony. Our topic today is the Afterlife Frequency. MarkAnthony, also known as the Psychic Lawyer and the Psychic Explorer, is a fourth-generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits. He's an Oxford-educated trial attorney and is also known as the Psychic Explorer due to his extensive background in science, quantum physics, survival of consciousness, and near-death experiences, history, archaeology, philosophy, theology, you name it, he knows about it. And when he was featured on the CBS show The Doctors, information he provided during a reading cracked a cold case murder. And he's a featured speaker at conferences, expos, and universities, and the co-host of the hit live stream show, The Psychic and the Doc, on the Transformation Network. Mark, thank you so much for being with us today. I always love talking to you. Welcome.
Oh, ditto, Lisa. I always enjoy working with you, and I love the Shift Network. And thank you for having me as part of the Beyond the Veil Summit.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure to have you here because I've read your book. It's not out yet as I read it, so I got a preview copy, but I really enjoyed it. Now, one of the things I liked about the Afterlife Frequency is that it introduces really interesting new terms and concepts about spirit communication, which are all based on science, which we all love. We love the proof. But one of those terms that really caught my eye is the term electromagnetic soul. In fact, here's a quote from your book that this really clicked for me when I read it. I had this aha moment. It said, an NDE occurs when a person clinically dies and their electromagnetic soul temporarily separates from the body and then returns as the person comes back to life. And for some reason, that wording it made so much sense. Even though I've heard about NDEs, I've studied it, that wording just flipped my perspective on the subject. So let's start there. Can you explain what the electromagnetic soul is?
For too long, spirit communication has been defined by terminology from the Victorian era. And one of the reasons I wrote the Afterlife Frequency was to update all of this based on 21st century science. And the study of consciousness has been going on literally for thousands of years. So looking at consciousness and studying it in the realm of psychology, philosophy, and neuroscience, who and what we are is referred to as consciousness. In the realms of faith, it's called either the soul or the spirit. And my studies also stem from my work as a trial attorney, because when I was practicing law, I was not only in criminal defense, and I was also a civil trial lawyer, and I specialized in head injury. So I've been studying the human brain for years. And we now know that the brain has an electrical field and an electromagnetic field. And so I started realizing that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. But what do people of faith believe? That the soul, the spirit, pre-exists the body, comes into the body, and then moves on after the body dies. And it dawned on me that the proper terminology for this is the electromagnetic soul. So if we can go ahead and put up slide 1, I developed this term as a 21st century way of describing what we really are, which is pure consciousness that is eternal electromagnetic energy. And it's fascinating because when I had my book peer reviewed, Dr. Gary Schwartz of the University of Arizona, and he's a parapsychologist. I believe he's got 2 PhDs, background at Harvard, Yale, and he's the head of consciousness studies at University of Arizona. When he read that, he called me up and goes, Mark, he goes, 25 years ago, I came up with the electromagnetic dynamical system for brain body. He goes, you said it so much better. This is what it is, the electromagnetic soul. He goes, oh my God. He goes, can I use this? And I said, absolutely. So we're referring to this just as short as the EMS. the electromagnetic soul.
Yeah, and that's just perfectly stated. It's short, it's to the point, and it just opens your eyes to, oh, okay, that's what we're talking about. Perfect, beautiful. Now, also in the book, you talk about different forms of contact with spirits, such as through a medium like yourself, or even in the dream state. Some people have deathbed visions. We're talking about near death and shared death experiences in this summit, and there's also the proverbial "I saw a ghost" experience. Let's talk about that a bit.
Absolutely. And if we can refer to slide 2, like you just explained, these are the different forms of interdimensional communication. Because what I've done in the Afterlife Frequency is near-death experiences, shared-death experiences, deathbed visions, mediumship, visitations, out-of-body experiences have traditionally been treated as separate phenomena. And so they're put into separate boxes. And after years of study and communication with spirits and having had a near-death experience myself, it dawned on me that they're all very similar because they deal with frequency shift. And they all deal with the energy of the electromagnetic soul, the frequency of the EMS changing to align with the higher vibration of the afterlife frequency of the other side. So all these different phenomenon actually have a common denominator. It's energy and its frequency alignment. And also they're all different forms of interdimensional communication. What I mean by interdimensional communication, we live in the material world. And so everything has a vibration. We know from quantum physics, everything's made of molecules, which are made of atoms, and atoms are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons. And electrons are a subatomic particle, and protons and neutrons are also composed of smaller particles known as quantum, ergo quanta plural. So everything, Lisa, on the subatomic level is composed of electromagnetic energy. And so when I talk about the electromagnetic soul, we know that the brain has an electrical field. We know that the pineal gland in the brain has calcite and magnetite crystals in it, and magnetite with magnetism, so that everything is interconnected energetically. And I saw that when people begin to either transition, which would be in a deathbed vision, or they have a near-death experience where the EMS leaves the soul, or they have mediumship, a mediumship experience, either as a medium or a visitation. Everything that's happening is the vibration of the EMS, the electromagnetic soul, elevating and touching the afterlife frequency. So the other side dimension is pure energy, and it's on a very, very high vibration. Let me simplify. Think of our world as AM radio, the other side as FM radio, and we get a frequency alignment, and that is interdimensional communication. So we can see from slide 2 the different forms of interdimensional communication, but let's now talk about the mechanics of it. Let's go to slide 3, brainwave frequencies. We have 5 different brainwave frequencies: gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. All right, gamma is when we're in that frenetic. This is when you're doing calculus problems, or you're on Final Jeopardy and you're either a Ken Jennings or a Matamodio. Okay, that's when you are in full energetic swing. Beta is in the state that we are in now. It's the conscious awake state. That's where you're able to get up, drive your car, write checks, deal with everyday life. But then when you relax, you go into alpha. And if you notice from the slide, I depicted gamma as a very high frequency, a lot of vibration there. Beta as also very high frequency, but not so much. But when we get to alpha, do you see that there is a lower frequency but it's more of a pulsating energy. And then when you go from alpha to the theta border, and theta is dreamful sleep, it's deep sleep, a state of relaxation. Delta is very little brain wave activity, but it's important because that's when your body repairs and heals itself. But the reason I have the arrow between alpha and theta, it is on the alpha theta border that psychic and mediumistic activity occur. Because what happens is, as people relax, they get to a frequency state between alpha and theta that enables spirit communication. Now, spirits are able to identify this because being energy, they pick up on this. And that's why, Lisa, so many people have spirit communication in the dream state. And you know what's funny about that is if you have a dream where your Aunt Betty comes and talks to you in a dream, you have a visitation, and it feels real, people are more prone to believe that than they are when they're at work and next to the water cooler, they see an image of Aunt Betty appear. And for thousands of years, we have depictions of this throughout all the scriptures and in historical records. I mean, in the Bible, it's used many times how dreams are used by spirits, angels, to come and communicate with people. So it's part of our culture to be more accepting of spirit communication through the dream state. Now, when it comes to people perceiving spirits, for some reason, mediums like myself, we're able to go from the beta state to the alpha theta border within seconds. Whereas normally this takes hours. You go to sleep and then you eventually get to that frequency in a deep state of sleep that makes you more receptive and conducive to receiving spirit communication. So that's one of the things that scientists have been studying. Why are some people able to do it within seconds, whereas other people, it just takes longer for that to happen, and it happens when they're in the dream state?
Right. Well, that's an excellent question. I think so, because I was just thinking it. Now, what I'm wondering then is I'm looking at the slide here. You say that the communication most often happens between alpha and theta.
Correct.
So does that mean that people, for lack of a better word, on the other side, that's the frequency that they're vibrating at, and that's why you're able to match?
That's a good question, but no, they're at a much higher frequency, but they are able to spot when you go to that, and that's when our brain is receptive to it. So think of it this way. We're on the first floor, they're on the third floor, and they know when we're about on the second floor. Okay, so they come down and meet us on the second floor. And that's the zone in between our material world dimension and the other side, because their frequency is ultra, ultra high. Now, let's do the flip side of the coin. Let's take the skeptical side. Well, if this is true, why don't we just locate the electromagnetic soul and the afterlife frequency by doing a test like an EEG, an electroencephalogram, or a QEEG, a quantitative electroencephalogram? First off, that's an excellent question, but EEGs and QEEGs are wonderful diagnostic tools for determining injury to the tissue of the brain, and also electrical flow through the brain at some level, but they are not designed to detect these higher harmonic frequencies. And Professor Shelley Joy, who is a brain expert, has said that it appears that there are harmonic frequencies between the mind body, the electromagnetic soul, and body interaction that are functioning on such a high level that our technology cannot detect it, at least the diagnostic medical technology of EEGs and QEEGs. So while the skeptics, like say, why don't we just hook it up? Well, because that's not what those devices are developed for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, then let me ask another question. Since we're talking about the electromagnetic soul, is there a way somehow to magnetize, using that word, to attract communication with the other side? Is there something that we can do to become more magnetically attractive to communication?
When we did the Ancestral Healing Summit, my topic was frequency beacons. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to reference those. Think of everyone that you know, especially those that you love, Lisa, on this side and the other side, that you're connected to them through a three-dimensional spider web. But let's take the spider out of it, okay? But the thing about spider webs is the way a spider knows that something's there is because, let's say an insect, they hit the spider web and a vibration goes to the spider and it says, aha, there's something in the web. Well, it's the same thing. We are all energetically interconnected with our loved ones, both in this world and the other side. For those of you who are parents, every parent I know practically can say that they've had experiences where they knew something wrong was happening with their child. Okay, they didn't get a cell phone call, they didn't see it, but they had a feeling which turned out to be true. Is this a coincidence? Certainly not. This is a frequency beacon. Yet it's even more potent when it involves a spirit. Why? Because spirits are not burdened by the lower, slower vibration of a dense material body. They are pure energy, pure frequency. And so if you are grieving a loved one, you are sending that vibration along that web. Similarly, spirits can emit a frequency to you. That's why so many people will be driving in their car and they feel compelled to turn on the radio and there's that special song. Okay. Or you keep noticing coins. Okay. Some people say, every time I find a quarter, heads up, I think of my mom. And, or a frequency beacon can also be, let's say all of a sudden you're smelling, wow, that was my late wife's perfume. I'm smelling it, but there's no perfume bottles anywhere around. These are all different forms of frequency beacons. And so that's one of the ways that we emit a beacon, a transmission to a spirit to draw them in. Now, there's other modalities as well. Meditations where you're clearing your mind, and you can do various meditative practices to calm yourself down and then open yourself up to, first, maybe you want to make contact with your spirit guides. You may want to put messages out for loved ones to come forward. And so you can do that as well. But I think what you wanted to ask me about was what do we do, or how do we spot contact from spirits?
Yeah, that was what I was trying clumsily to ask. Well, although let's veer off just a bit here. You talked about coins, which reminds me of one of my favorite stories in your book. So I'm going to ask you first to tell the story. It's about the nickel and the penny, and tell us what that meant to you. But because this specific story, which you're about to tell, was a very solid message to you, an undeniable message to you, what I'm wondering about is, how do we know when we can actually trust that a message genuinely is from loved ones, higher self, higher frequencies? How do we know that that's where that's coming from, and that they're not, I don't know, there's so many folks these days are falling down these rabbit holes, following what they think is their intuition giving them messages, but it's actually leading them into madness. So how do we tell the difference between a genuine message and something that we really shouldn't be listening to?
That's an excellent point. It comes down to this: nothing spiritual is controlling. Messages of a spiritual nature are about love, healing, and resolution. They're never about inciting people to commit acts of violence. It's never about anger, bigotry, hatred. Messages from spirits. And, I firmly believe in God. I believe in God, that we're all interconnected. God is in us. God is all around us. God is is this quantum field, that there's an intelligence, and healing is a gift from God. And so that's why when people receive a message in the dream state from a loved one who's passed, they wake up feeling, oh God, that felt so good. It was a real conversation with my child who died. Or people have a contact through a medium and they feel, oh my gosh, this was really wonderful. Look at people like Edgar Cayce, who brought forth in the trance state where he was communicating with the afterlife frequency, cures, medical treatments. I mean, think about, so many stories about Jesus were healing people. So this is when you know that it's coming from the higher power, the collective consciousness, the afterlife frequency is its love, healing, and resolution. Well, I was trying to figure out, how do I explain to people who are not mediums how they can have a mediumistic or psychic experience? Because even though not everyone is a psychic or a medium, everyone is capable of having a psychic or mediumistic experience. And this was when I was working on the book, The Afterlife Frequency. And so I was at my computer, where I am right now, and I hit the dreaded writer's block. I mean, whack. It's like hitting a brick wall. For anyone who's had writer's block, I think probably anyone who's written anything from a thesis or a term paper or a book or anything, I just couldn't get a thing. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm going to go for a walk. So I live near the ocean, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go for a walk on the beach. That always mellows me out. So I go outside, I start walking towards the beach, and all of a sudden I get this feeling, and I do an about face, and I head towards this bike path, which is in the opposite direction. So I'm walking along the bike path. It's probably about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I see these two things shining in the light. And I walk up, and I see it. It's a nickel and a penny. And I look at them, and I hear my mother's voice, but both my parents have passed. Both my parents were mediums. And I hear my mother's voice say, if they're heads down, don't touch them. And I started laughing because my mother's family was of Italian descent, and that part of the family has a superstition for all occasions. Don't cross your silverware, don't do this, don't walk under a ladder. And then I hear my dad's voice say, it's money, grab it. And so I'm laughing. And so I pick this nickel and this penny up, and I'm looking at him in my hand. I go, oh, 6 cents. And then I say, 6 cents. And it hits me, and I'm getting cold chills or tingles. And I'm like, okay. Something, I'm hearing my parents' voice, and I'm feeling this. And then in my mind's eye, I see the image of my dad standing in the ocean up to his waist in water. And my dad was a Navy SEAL. He was also a scuba diver and a swimming instructor at the YMCA. And he used to have this blue canvas raft, and he's holding this raft. And I'm getting raft. And then it hit me: recognize, accept, feel, trust. And I got chills all over my body. The chills are when a spirit is touching us, when the spirit's electromagnetic field touches our electromagnetic field, the physiological response is cold, chills, and tingles. So that's why a lot of people think spirit contact is spooky, because it's the same physiological response as the fight or flight mechanism. And then I realized this is what my parents want me to know, to teach people to recognize the signs from spirit, accept the contact as real, feel it, don't question it, and then trust the message. Interesting, you brought up trust in your question. So I ran back to my house, got the computer on, and the words just flew out of my fingers. I wrote like 10 paragraphs. It just happened. Writer block over, and I had the RAFT technique. So for people who are mediums or non-mediums, the RAFT technique can also apply to making sense of a near-death experience. It can make sense of a deathbed vision. It can make sense of when you catch a glimpse of somebody out of your peripheral vision, or you get the dream. What happens is with RAFT, and I go into great detail explaining this, and I give some exercises in the book how to enhance this, but the short version is, when you recognize a sign from a spirit, whether it's that I turned on the radio and there's that song, or I felt the presence of my loved one, okay? Or you smell the familiar scent. Recognize that as the sign. Accept it as real. Feel it. Now, this is where people get bogged down. It's the third step, feeling. You have to feel it without fear and emotionally let it resonate through you. What happens is a lot of people start it's my imagination. It's a grief-induced hallucination. I really want this to be the case. Oh, that can't be it. How could this possibly be? And so it fizzles out in the feel stage. If you push that aside, feel it, and then trust the message. And getting back to your earlier question, yeah, there's a lot of craziness now on the internet and news services and all that are saying, oh, these messages come to me, so let's do violent things. No, you know to trust the message because it's going to be positive. Okay, spirits are never going to say, go take gun and shoot someone, all right? That's never a message. It's going to be a message of love, healing, resolution. Perhaps you'll feel your child's spirit coming through, okay? And it may bring a tear to your eye, but it's a tear of not just grief, but also comfort, of love. It may be, I really need to go to the doctor. I've been having this issue, and now I feel, since I've had this experience, I need to go to the doctor. That's a healing modality. Resolution. She really does forgive me. And when people start employing this, it's going to open up a whole new dimension to having spiritual contact on a personal level. So that's why I developed the RAFT technique. Mm-hmm. And how? I mean, I to this day, every time I think about those, the two coins, it just, when you're a medium, people think that, we're bombarded by spirits constantly. You have to learn to turn this on and turn it off, because otherwise it's going to be chatter and clatter. And also, do you leave the doors and windows of your house open 24/7? Of course not. So why would you do that to your mind? But no matter how many years, my entire life, that I've been able to do this, they never cease to amaze me and even surprise me. And it's not just me. This is something that's available for everyone.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it feels almost like they get a real kick out of coming up with new ways to surprise you.
That they do. And if we can look at slide 4, this is a good depiction of, we're in the material world dimension. That's the lower, slower vibration at the bottom. And then the higher vibration at the top is the other side, the afterlife frequency of the other side. And then in between, this is where interdimensional communication occurs. This is an overlap of the two vibrational frequencies. This is where an NDE, a near-death experience, occurs. This is where a shared death experience occurs, a deathbed vision, a visitation in a dream. And this is what happens during mediumship. Everything is about frequency. We started seeing this when Einstein and Max Planck and Niels Bohr and Louis de Broglie and the quantum physicists of the late 19th, early 20th century realized and discovered that everything was on a subatomic level, quanta, and that everything has a vibration. Okay, so this pen has a vibration. This pen on a subatomic level is made of the same energy that I am, but its vibration is at a much lower and slower level. And Lisa, in the lights behind you, that has a vibration, because the energy that's coming, the electricity, which is electromagnetic energy, which is being converted into light energy, which is illuminating your room. That too is the same energy that you and I am, as is the air that we breathe, the space between the earth and the sun, the nuclear reactions within the sun. And this is why so many people that engage in deeply spiritual practices and people who have a near-death experience return from the encounters and the experience saying we're all interconnected, because we are energetically.
Right. That this makes so much sense, and I really appreciate the visual aids that you're bringing, because it just, well, obviously you know why you brought them. They really help to understand what you're talking about here. Now, what I'm interested in all of it, but you're talking about deathbed visions, which I've been at the bedside of people who are in the process of crossing over, and they do have visions. They do see loved ones who are waiting for them, who are telling them, hey, it's time to come with us. So let's talk about that for a bit. I understand that these are really the most reported forms of spirit contact. Is that accurate?
Yes, they really are. And in the field of near-death experiences, and once again, I was talking about traditionally everything's been categorized. Okay, that's an NDE. This is deathbed vision. They're all beginning to overlap now, because now we're seeing the frequency, and the frequency overlaps, the energetic overlaps. A deathbed vision. This occurs when somebody who is transitioning, somebody who is actively dying, and he or she will report or start talking to spirits of deceased loved ones, and they'll be having conversations with them. And the scientists have been studying them. And my friend and colleague, Dr. Jeffrey Long of NDERF, the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, that's the largest database of near-death experiences in the world. And people from all over the world contribute to this, doctors and experiencers. And what we're seeing is that deathbed visions are indeed the most commonly reported form of interdimensional communication. So what's happens is a person is transitioning, and the spirits know that. Okay, the afterlife frequency knows this, so the spirits connected with that person are coming through. And to paraphrase the name of this seminar, the person in this world is seeing beyond the veil. Okay, that veil is also what I call the zone, the NDE zone between this side and the other side. Okay, so seeing beyond the veil is perception of the afterlife frequency. So what happens is these spirits are around, because when the person dies, and we know this from NDEs, is that when a person leaves their body, there are spirits there to greet them and welcome them to this new dimension. Well, what happens is that bystanders get caught up in this frequency as well. So people who are not dying or in imminent danger of dying, the electromagnetic field of their brain, their electromagnetic soul's energy begins to interface, and they too will see some of these spirits. And Dr. Raymond Moody has termed the shared death experiences, because what happens is the DBV, the deathbed vision, now becomes something people who aren't dying experience. So several people at one time are caught up in this wave of frequency. And I myself have been at a number of bedsides of people who are dying, because families call me in to be there, for this purpose. But what will happen is people can actually see the life review, the reflection of someone's entire life happening. At the moment of passing, bystanders who are not mediums will see a surge of white light come out of the person's body. They may even see a transparent replica of that person leaving. They may get this sensation that they're being lifted off their feet. Now, that's always really fascinating when that happens, because what's going on there is they're so caught up in the frequency, for a few moments, they're actually feeling what it's like to transition. Other people report indescribably beautiful music frequency, higher frequency. So this is a very, very fascinating field, how a deathbed vision becomes a shared death experience because more than one person is experiencing it. There's another element to this too. The reductionist materialist skeptics, oh, this is all, hooey. Well, something goes from being subjective to objective when more than one person experiences it. And so when you have half a dozen people or more, maybe family members, a couple hospice workers or healthcare workers, people not even connected emotionally to the person dying, and they all start reporting the same thing, now we're on to something. And so this is the new frontier in afterlife and survival of consciousness research.
So now, one of the things that you're really interested in, that you know a lot about, is technologies to communicate with the other side. So I would love it if you'd tell us a little bit about that.
Certainly. For over a century now, scientists have been fascinated and attempting to develop technology to communicate with the other side. And Thomas Edison, back in the 1920s, in some of the last interviews he did before he died, he said he was working on a device sensitive enough to communicate with discarnate intelligence, in other words, spirits. And the media nicknamed it the spirit phone. And my friend and colleague, Dr. Gary Schwartz of Arizona, is actually working on technology now called the soul phone. I am not at liberty to discuss the details of this. I'm on the board of directors of the Soul Phone Project. Let me tell you something. It's amazing. But what about between Edison and Dr. Schwartz? What's been happening then? Well, science hasn't been stagnant. And Lisa, you've seen, and you've probably been on some paranormal investigations, right? Some ghost hunts and stuff. They're kind of fun. Yeah,
they are.
Everyone put it on your bucket list. Go on at least one ghost hunt, one paranormal investigation. A lot of it's sitting around, drinking coffee, waiting for something to happen. And then when it does, it really does. But there are different types of devices that scan the electromagnetic spectrum, looking for anomalies like infrared, EMF spikes, tuning radio wave frequencies, listening to try to tune into voices of spirits. I want to bring up slide number 5. That's a picture of the best friend I ever had, Billy. We met when we were 11 years old, and we went to junior high school, college together. And when I graduated college, I went to law school. He went to Asia, and he learned to speak Japanese, Thai, Indonesian, and some Cantonese. And he was in Japan, in Tokyo, teaching Japanese executives English. And so I went to visit him, and we had a lot of adventures in Southeast Asia. In fact, the first chapter of the Afterlife Frequency is one of our really harrowing adventures in Thailand. But that picture is at Kinkakuji, the Golden Temple in Japan. Absolutely beautiful place. And in high school, it started a debate. We had both been raised in the Catholic Church, but Billy was an atheist. I argued the other side, if you will. And he would always say, especially when we got in college and then when we were in Japan and traveling through Asia together, he said, Mark, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in an afterlife. I don't understand, though, how you do that psychic thing. Okay. And so he was open-minded, because a skeptic is open-minded. A cynic is closed-minded and says, I don't believe it. But a true skeptic is open-minded. And so we had this ongoing debate our entire lives about the existence of an afterlife. And he always said, well, science can't prove it. And I would say, well, it's only a matter of time. Well, a few years after that, he met the love of his life in Japan, Yuki. And one of the greatest honors of my life, Lisa, is he and Yuki asked me to perform their wedding ceremony because I was a notary public. And I'll never forget all of our friends there, all of our buddies from college and the ones that we grew up with. And my parents were there and his parents. It was one of those just really happy memories in life. And things seemed to go well. But a few years after that, unfortunately, Billy always struggled with depression. And I'll never forget getting the call from Yuki, and she said they said that he died from suicide. I was absolutely devastated. And so a couple years later, I was on the tour for my first book, Never Letting Go. And it brought me to the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. There was a paranormal convention, and I was one of the speakers there. And my manager, Rocky, was with me. And anyone who's been to any of my events, Rocky's always there and she organizes everything. It's great having Rocky. She's like, 5 people in one. I mean, she just gets all these things done and all this. And so I had given my presentation. I was giving a lecture about the science of spirit communication. And so I was at a table and I was autographing books, copies of Never Letting Go. So Rocky is walking around, and I want to go ahead and bring up slide 6 now. And there were, at this convention, there were other mediums, but there were also paranormal investigators. And they were displaying and selling K2 meters, EMF meters, ultraviolet detectors, the EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, and the spirit box. And so here I am, I'm signing books. Rocky's walking along, and there's a very well-known paranormal investigator. His first name is Chris. And she's walking by, and he has the spirit box on display. And as she's walking by, she hears, "Get Mark." And she goes, "What?" And she stopped, and she goes, and Chris looked at her, and it said, "Get Mark." And he goes, do you think he means your Mark? You mean MarkAnthony? And so all of a sudden I hear, "Mark, get over here." And I look up and I'm like, "What?" And they're waving at me, and like people were starting to crowd around the table there. So I get up and I run over, and Rocky has tears coming out of her eyes. And as I walk up to the table, I hear, "Dude," and my heart almost stopped. And then I heard, "Love you, bro." And I go, "Oh my God, I know that voice." And Rocky said, "Mark, that's Billy." His voice came out of that thing. And see, we grew up in East Coast, Central Florida. We're in the surfing culture. Sorry. And he always called me dude and bro. And I remember one of the last times I saw him was at the airport in Bangkok, because we had separate flights. And the last thing he said to me was, "Love you, bro." And so I was totally shocked and stunned. And then after I got over the initial shock, I started laughing and go, "Well, isn't that just him?" I remembered him saying, "Well, science can't prove spirit contact." And so what did he do? He used technology to come through, tell Rocky, "Get Mark," in front of a crowd of people that had no idea who he was. And I come up, and then he tells me the two things that I would know without a doubt it was him, and it was his voice. And it's like, so apparently science can prove the existence of an afterlife, and science can facilitate spirit communication. And he let me know that. And you know what, Lisa, that got everything with me, the wheels turning. That was one of the reasons that I started redefining the terminology associated with spirit communication in my last book, Evidence of Eternity. But that incident was the genesis for me writing the Afterlife Frequency. And I also believe that nothing is a coincidence, that spirits, I call it, one of my terms is spiritual synchronicity. That's exactly what that was. He picked the precise right moment. Talk about a frequency beacon. This is more like a frequency fire hose. I mean, it hit me like, oh my goodness. And that's why, like earlier, I think I said that, spirits never stop surprising me. And that's what happened. And that just goes to show you that spirit communication is real. It can be proven by science. As our science progresses, we're only going to make better and more discoveries. It proves to us that we are not these physical bodies. We are in these bodies. We are electromagnetic souls. And that means we're pure consciousness that is eternal electromagnetic energy.
Wow. I don't think we can top that story. So I think that's a great place to go ahead and wrap this up. The Afterlife Frequency is available at afterlifefrequency.com. Mark, wow, this has been, like I said earlier, I love talking to you, but this has been really mind-blowing. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. Do you have anything else on your mind, or do you feel like this is a good place to wrap it up too?
Just, people can find my book, sign up for my newsletter, find out when I'll be on the Shift Network next, and the guests that we're going to have on my show, The Psychic and the Doc. Also, you can sign up for a private session with me. And because phone readings are just as accurate as in-person readings. Why? Because spirits, being electromagnetic energy, move at the speed of light, which is the same speed as a phone call. And my book is available for sale at all fine bookstores and on Amazon.com. And Lisa, I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone connected with the Shift Network. And I want to thank all of the attendees. Thank you so much for tuning in. Many blessings, and keep looking to the light. Namaste.
Namaste back at you, pal. Wow. Thank you again for being with us today. I want to remind everyone, I've been talking with MarkAnthony, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation in the Beyond the Veil Summit.